Hello students, this is a recorded video lecture to let you understand the construction and working of bipolar junction transistor, that is BJT, which is the topic to be discussed in the second module of your basic electronics subject. To understand this topic, which is bipolar junction transistor, by now you must be very clear about the different types of semiconductor materials, that is p-type materials, n-type materials, and you must be very clear. You must be very clear about the uh, how the p-n junction, how it works. So I expect that everybody must be very clear about the semiconductor materials and the p-n junction, the concept of depletion region, how the p-n junction works in the different biasing conditions, that is in no bias condition, in forward bias condition, and in reverse bias condition. So if you are very much clear about the p-n junction and how it operates in different bias conditions, you are very much ready to understand this topic, which is the next device, which talks about the next device, which is a three terminal device, and this is bipolar junction transistor. So we will cover the topic of bipolar junction transistor by starting off with first trying to understand how the bipolar junction transistor looks construction wise. So we'll try to understand how the different semiconductor layers are arranged to make up a BJT, that is bipolar junction transistor. Then we'll move to, so we'll try to understand the operation of the three terminal device BJT. Then we'll try to find out what are the different configurations in which the BJT can be put in the circuit. So because it's a three terminal device, and in any configuration there has to be one input terminal, one output terminal, and another terminal has to be a common point between the input and output. So since BJT is a three terminal device, it allows for three different configurations in the way I just told you: one input, an output, and another terminal which is common to the input and output. So we'll try to understand how the BJT behaves in the different configurations. So after discussing the BJT configuration, we'll try to understand the applications of the BJT. What kind of circuits can be made out of a BJT? So generally the BJT in any circuit, in the it is either used to make a amplifier, or it is configured in a circuit to make up a switch. So BJT is used either to make a amplifier circuit, or it is used to make a switch circuit. So how BJT is applied in a circuit to make up an amplifier or to make up a switch, we'll see upon it. Before going into the construction and operational details of the BJT, let us have a brief historical overview of the BJT. In this historical overview, we'll try to answer a certain questions. We'll try to answer the first question being, which device before BJT could do all the works that BJT now claims to do the thing? And the answer is the vacuum tube devices. The vacuum tube triodes used to do all the work. Now after the coming of BJT, the BJT now claims to do the same things. So we'll look into it with some more detail. Then we'll try to answer the second question. The second question being, what are the added benefits, what are the additional new features that a BJT claims to have, so that it makes itself so much attractive to replace the vacuum tube triodes. So this we'll try to answer in this historical overview. BJT, the bipolar junction transistor, is a three terminal solid state device, and in this formation it was brought to us in the year 1947 by three scientists working in the Bell Laboratories, and those scientists were Dr. S. William Shockley, Walter H. Brattain, and John Burdeen. And they, in the year 1947, they demonstrated the amplifying action of the transistor. And later on, these were improved, and the version of the BJT that we are using nowadays is a much improved version of that was demonstrated in 1947. So things have changed in terms of how the BJT is produced and the quality of BJT, the design of BJT. In terms of that also, the BJT has changed a lot. Before this solid state BJT, the solid state means the transistor that is made of the semiconductor materials. Whatever semiconductor based devices are there, we say them as solid state devices. So PN junction diode is a solid state device. So BJT is also a solid state device because these are made of semiconductor materials, the P-type materials, N-type materials. So out of these materials only the PN junction diode and BJT are made. So these semiconductor materials are also called as solid state devices. So before this, the vacuum tube based devices were into the use. So let us talk something about the non-solid state devices. So what I mean from non-solid state devices are the devices equivalent to diodes and transistor but was not based on the semiconductor materials. So I'm trying to tell you about the vacuum tubes. So vacuum tubes, the first vacuum tube was introduced to the scientific society in 1904 by J.A. Fleming, and then in 1906 another scientist, Lee De Forest, added a third element into the vacuum tube. So initially the vacuum tube was a two-terminal device which could act as a diode. So we called it vacuum tube diode. But later the third element was introduced by Lee De Forest in the year 1906. So that the third element was called as the control grid. So in this version of the vacuum tube, the two-terminal vacuum tube, which acted like a diode, the two terminals were the anode terminal and the cathode terminal. So these were the two terminals in the vacuum tube diode. In the 1904 J.A. Fleming version of the vacuum tube. But later in 1906 Lee De Forest introduced the third element which he called controlled grid. So now this new vacuum tube had three terminals, namely the anode, the cathode, and this control grid. And this vacuum tube was called as vacuum tube triode, and this could be used to make up amplifier circuits because the current flow from anode to cathode could be controlled by an electrical parameter at the control grid, and this very functionality helped to design amplifiers. So when we studied the PN junction diode, it was a replacement for vacuum tube diode. So when we are talking about the BJT in this chapter, in this module, in our discussion, so when we are talking about the BJT, we are talking about a replacement for the vacuum tube triode. At present, the vacuum tube triodes has been completely replaced by the solid state transistors like BJTs and other transistors, and the vacuum tube diodes has been completely replaced by the PN junction diodes, the solid state diodes. Still, for a historical and a conceptual point of view, we must try to understand how those vacuum tube devices used to operate, how they could work as a diode and triodes. At this point, you now already know how a vacuum tube diode and the vacuum tube triode look like construction wise, and how it operated, how it was operated for a particular application as a diode or as a triode. So let us discuss what were the disadvantages of those vacuum tubes. The vacuum tubes were larger devices, much bulkier devices. Secondly, the vacuum tubes had a cathode which had to be heated before pushing them into operation. So every time the vacuum tube was to make some use of, the cathode needed to be heated up so that it could ooze out electrons out of it. So there was a large amount of power loss to heat up the cathode. Third disadvantage is that vacuum tube was very much fragile. It was a bulky device made out of glass, vacuum inside it with electrodes like cathode and anode, and if it is a triode, then it is a additional control grid terminal. But all those things were packed inside a glass chamber having vacuum inside it, whereas BJT was a semiconductor devices, and it was small in size and it was rugged in construction. So we can say that construction wise BJT was much more robust. Now the next disadvantage is that BJTs were very less power consuming. The BJTs are very less power consuming devices as compared to the vacuum tube triodes, and hence you can say that BJTs are much more efficient. Whereas the BJTs were instantly available for use, requiring no warm-up period, the vacuum tube triodes, they had a cathode which needed a heater. A heat operation has to be done to the cathode in order to make them bring them into use. So the BJTs are instantly available for use, whereas the vacuum tube triodes, you have to wait until the cathode gets heated up enough. And the last disadvantage of the vacuum tubes that we can discuss is the vacuum tubes could be operated above a certain voltage level. A lower voltage operations was not possible for vacuum tube triodes, whereas the BJTs could be operated at much lower voltages and current. Here in this picture I am trying to show you a physical BJT, how it looks like. So this black portion having this semiconductor materials inside this package, this whole body, you can compare its size with your fingernail, and it has 3 terminals coming out. Because it's a 3 terminal device, the 3 terminals are coming out of this semiconductor package. So this if it has a flat portion and it has a round portion at the other side. The flat portion has been kept at top in this picture and the round portion is down. And if you'll keep the BJT in this manner, you can identify for this particular BJT, the leftmost terminal is your emitter terminal, the middle one is base, and the last terminal, the rightmost terminal, is the collector. Emitter, base and collector. Now I will move to discussing the construction diagram of the BJT. So BJTs, they are three layer semiconductor devices. They are three layer semiconductor devices. The BJTs can be of two types. Either it can be a NPN BJT or it can be a PNP BJT. So if it is a NPN BJT, it has two N layers and one P layer. if it is a p-n-p BJT, then it has two p-type layers and one n-type layer, one n-type semiconductor layer. So anyway, irrespective of whether it is a NPN or PNP BJT, it has three semiconductor layers. Out of these three layers of semiconductor materials, from each semiconductor layer, a terminal is taken out, giving rise to three terminals, and the three terminals are named as emitter, collector, and base. Emitter, base, and collector terminals. For a particular BJT, the emitter, base, and collector terminals are very much unique for that particular BJT. You cannot treat the emitter terminal as collector, you cannot treat the base terminal as emitter, or anything like this. So every terminal in a particular BJT is very much specific, and very much specific only. So for this, it is obvious that each of the terminals coming out from their respective layers must be having something unique in itself. So the emitter layer of a BJT is very much heavily doped. The base and collector are very much lesser doped as compared to the emitter. The least doped layer is the base layer. The emitter is highest doped, and the collector is a bit lesser doped, and the base layer is least doped layer of a BJT. If we'll compare the respective widths of the different layers, if you have a PNP, this is the construction diagram, this is not a physical diagram, this is a construction diagram to demonstrate how the width and how the different layers are arranged inside a BJT. So you should not confuse these diagrams of this one as a PNP transistor, this one as an NPN transistor. You should not take it as a physical diagram. These are the construction diagram just for study purpose. So out of the three layers, if let us take the case of PNP BJT, out of the three layers, the sandwiched base layer is having a very thin width. It has a very lesser width. So if the total width, if you can compare, if it is 0.150 inch, then here for a typical BJT, the base layer is having a width of 0.001 inch. So there is a ratio of typically 150:1. So if the total width of the BJT, including three of the layers, is 150, then the base comprises only one part out of this 150. So such thin is the base layer in a BJT. The same goes with the NPN BJT. The base layer is the thinnest. So irrespective of whether it is a PNP or NPN BJT, the base layer is the thinnest layer of the BJT, and typical ratio is 150:1. If 150 is the part of the P and P three layers, then the base layer is only one part of the 150. Now talking about the doping, as I said, the doping concentration in the base layer is also the least. And how less? It is 1:10. If the total doping made in a typical BJT is 10, then the doping in the base layer is only one part of it. So you can say that the doping of the N layer is very much less as compared to the emitter layer and collector layer. Irrespective of whether it is a PNP or NPN BJT, the base layer is least doped. How much less? So this is a typical ratio, that is 1 part out of 10. So if 10 is the total doping of the whole material, then the base is only one part doped. So this is the construction diagram of a PNP BJT. There is a p-type semiconductor layer, there is an n-type semiconductor layer, and there is a p-type semiconductor layer. So of which this p layer has a collector terminal out of it, this p layer has an emitter terminal out of it, so E to represent emitter, C to represent collector, and B here to represent the base terminal which is coming out of this n layer. So this one is a PNP BJT. So similarly, this is the construction diagram of a NPN BJT. So we have a n layer here, n-type semiconductor layer, we have an n-type semiconductor here. So out of these two n-type semiconductor layers, this n-type semiconductor layer gives a emitter terminal out of it, and this n-type semiconductor layer gives a collector terminal out of it, and this sandwiched p layer gives this base terminal out of it. So this is a p and p BJT, and this is a NPN BJT. This is the construction diagram of NPN BJT. This is the construction diagram of a PNP BJT. So let us now go to discussing the operation of this device, that is bipolar junction transistor. But before that, we must clear ourselves what may be the possible reasons the way the device has been named so. We should be very clear about the nomenclature, the reason why the BJT has been named as bipolar junction transistor. What characteristics of this device lets it to be called as bipolar, and why we call it junction transistor? So the reason is very simple. This is called bipolar because while during operation, the movement of holes and the movement of electrons both are responsible for the operation of the BJT. You will see that holes and electrons both participate in the injection process during the operation of the BJT, and since both kind of charge carriers, holes as well as electrons, participate, that is why we call it bipolar. If it had been the case that only holes would have participated for the operation of a BJT, then we could have said it as unipolar. We could have said it is a unipolar device. But irrespective of whether it is a NPN or PNP BJT, in any case, both holes and electrons will participate in the injection process during the operation of BJT, and hence we are in a position to tell this device that it is a bipolar device. And so the nomenclature has a terminology which is bipolar in it. So bipolar junction transistor. And so why it is called junction? Because junction, the terminology junction is appearing in the nomenclature just because there are PN junctions in this BJT, and there are not one but two PN junctions. If you will see in the PNP BJT, there is a PN junction over here, and there is another PN junction over here. So there are two PN junctions in a BJT. This is the case in a PNP BJT, and similarly in this NPN BJT you will see there is a PN junction over here, and there is a second PN junction over here. So irrespective of whether it is PNP or NPN, they both have two PN junctions. And so we are calling this transistor as bipolar junction transistor. We'll again break down in the coming discussion. In the upcoming discussions, we will break down why we are saying it transistor. So we have already explained. I've already explained why the terminology bipolar and the terminology junction is appropriate in its nomenclature, but it is still to be discussed why transistor. Actually, transistors, the nomenclature transistor comes from transfer of resistors. Transfer of resistors. So transistor. So that nomenclature will be more clear when I'll show you an example where the transfer of resistance is taking place, to name it as transistor. And this is not the only transistor we have. This is the first transistor we are going to deal with, and there are so many other transistors we'll discuss in the coming classes. So I think the BJT nomenclature is quite clear why we are calling it bipolar junction transistor. So in order to discuss the transistor operation, to demonstrate the transistor operation, I have an option to choose a PNP BJT or to choose a NPN BJT. So in my case, I am choosing just for nothing the PNP BJT, and I could have easily chosen a NPN BJT to do the similar demonstration. But for a completion's sake, once I finish discussing the transistor operation with a PNP BJT, I will definitely tell you what are the changes that will take place if you would have discussed the transistor operation with an NPN BJT. Things will be quite similar. The events happening during the operation of a PNP BJT are quite similar to the events that are happening during the operation in an NPN BJT, in the way the role of holes is now getting played by the electrons, and the role of electrons are getting played by the holes. So we have our PNP BJT to discuss its operation, and I have two circuits for this PNP BJT. This is the P layer, N layer and P layer. So this makes a PNP BJT. This P layer, which is the emitter layer, so emitter terminal is coming out, and this N layer is the base layer, so base terminal is coming out over here. This layer being the collector layer, the collector terminal is coming out of here. So with this PNP BJT, I have made out two circuits. So in this circuit, in this very first circuit, I have applied a DC bias across the emitter base PN junction, and I have not applied any DC bias across the collector base junction. I have not applied any DC bias across the collector base PN junction. Whereas in the second circuit, I have applied a DC bias across the base collector PN junction, whereas I have not applied any DC bias across the emitter base PN junction. So we'll discuss the operation in two parts. In the first part, we'll see the effect of this DC bias in the PN junction over here, and in this circuit we'll see what is the effect of this DC bias on this PN junction, and later we'll combine these two analysis to make up a circuit in which both the DC biases are simultaneously there, here like this one. So in this, both the DC biases are simultaneously there, and then we'll see what will be the cumulative effect of both the analysis that we make over here in this case and in this case. So first, you just see in this case we have a DC bias which makes this PN junction forward biased, This emitter base PN junction is forward biased by this PN junction. In such a scenario, this PN junction has a depletion region whose width is quite reduced, because this emitter base junction, the emitter base PN junction is forward biased by this DC bias, so the depletion region is quite reduced in width, and so there is a generous flow of majority charge carriers from the emitter P layer to the base N layer. So what are the majority charge carriers in this emitter layer? The holes. So there is a generous flow of holes from P to the N type material. So we have our PNP BJT to discuss its operation, and I have two circuits for this PNP BJT. This is the P layer, N layer and P layer. So this makes a PNP BJT. This P layer, which is the emitter layer, so emitter terminal is coming out, and this N layer is the base layer, so base terminal is coming out over here. This layer being the collector layer, the collector terminal is coming out of here. So with this PNP BJT, I have made out two circuits. So in this circuit, in this very first circuit, I have applied a DC bias across the emitter base PN junction, and I have not applied any DC bias across the collector base junction. I have not applied any DC bias across the collector base PN junction. Whereas in the second circuit, I have applied a DC bias across the base collector PN junction, whereas I have not applied any DC bias across the emitter base PN junction. So we'll discuss the operation in two parts. In the first part, we'll see the effect of this DC bias in the PN junction over here, and in this circuit we'll see what is the effect of this DC bias on this PN junction, and later we'll combine these two analysis to make up a circuit in which both the DC biases are simultaneously there, here like this one. So in this, both the DC biases are simultaneously there, and then we'll see what will be the cumulative effect of both the analysis that we make over here in this case and in this case. So first, you just see in this case we have a DC bias which makes this PN junction forward biased, This emitter base PN junction is forward biased by this PN junction. In such a scenario, this PN junction has a depletion region whose width is quite reduced, because this emitter base junction, the emitter base PN junction is forward biased by this DC bias, so the depletion region is quite reduced in width, and so there is a generous flow of majority charge carriers from the emitter P layer to the base N layer. So what are the majority charge carriers in this emitter layer? The holes. So there is a generous flow of holes from P to the N type material. Now if you'll see in the second circuit, the DC bias has been applied to the collector base PN junction, and this DC bias is such that it reverse biases this PN junction. Unlike the case in this circuit, the DC bias was here forward biasing the PN junction, the emitter base PN junction, whereas in this circuit the collector base PN junction has been reverse biased by this DC bias. In such a case, you can see this black portion shows the width of depletion region, and depletion region width has been increased. There is a larger depletion region width just because this PN junction is reversed bias now. So here this black portion denoting the depletion region was quite lesser in width because this PN junction was forward biased by this DC bias. So now the charge flow that is ever possible in this PN junction, in this reverse biased PN junction, is the minority charge movement due to the minority charge movement. So what is the minority charge carriers in N-type materials? The holes are the minority charge carriers in this N-type material. So in the effect of this reverse bias across this PN junction, the holes will be the minority charge carriers holes of the N-type materials will move to the P-type material, from N to P-type material, and that minority charge carrier movement is quite scanty only. So the minority carriers will only, the minority charge carrier movement is the only contribution that will ever contribute to the any current in this particular circuit with this DC bias alone. So we have seen the effect of this DC bias in this PNP BJT and this DC bias in this PNP BJT. Now let us bring on both the DC bias, that means both the DC bias, let it be simultaneously present in the circuit, so that we have a circuit like here. So VEE to forward bias this emitter base junction, we have kept it here. The VCC to reverse bias this base collector base PN junction over here is present here. So what will be the effect, what will be the cumulative effect in the presence of both the DC biases? So as discussed here, the majority charge carriers of the P-type material, the holes are the majority charge carriers of the P-type material, they will find a reduced depletion region and they will cross generously to get into the N-type material. So this is because of the forward bias across the emitter base junction. So there will be a majority charge carrier movement, the holes movement from P-type to N-type material. And because the collector base junction is reverse biased, it has the tendency, this PN junction has the tendency to push the whatever minority charge carriers are there in the N-type material to the P-type material. And what are the minority charge carriers over here? Holes. But when this VEE DC bias is there, there is a contribution of holes into this N-type material due to the movement of majority charge carriers. So the majority charge carrier over here, the holes have moved to N-type material, and the same majority charge carrier holes are now same as the minority charge carriers in the N layer. So the majority holes which has moved to here in the N-type material are actually will be actually treated as minority charge carriers, because in an N-type material the minority charge carriers are holes only. So the large amount of majority holes which has moved over here in the N-type material as moved over here will be treated as minority charge carriers, and due to this reverse bias, those minority holes which are in large number coming from this layer to this layer will be pushed to the P-type material due to the effect of the reverse bias across this PN junction. So now the question is, will there not be any current in this direction? Will there not be any charge carrier movement in this direction? In this direction to the B terminal, the base terminal? So answer to this question is yes, there will be the movement of a charge carriers in the base terminal direction. There will be a movement of charge carriers in the base terminal direction, but the magnitude of the number of charge carrier movements in the base terminal direction will be very less, because of the fact that the base layer is already very thin. The way we have understood the construction, we are already aware of the construction of a BJT, and we already know that the transistors have a very thin, the BJT base layer has a very thin base layer, and the doping concentration of the base layer is also very less, so it offers a very less conductive path through the base terminal. So it is a very less conductive path through the base terminal, or you can say the resistivity or the resistance of offered to the charge carriers in the path to base terminal is quite high. The resistance is high. So most of the charge carriers will follow a path from N to P layer, and so we can say there will be a current IE in this direction. Why in this direction? Because there is a movement of positive charge carriers, that is holes, from this here, from this side to this side. So the direction of the current is in the direction of positive charge carriers. So IE will be in this direction. There will be a very small IB in this direction, and there will be a IC current in this direction. This IC is comparable but less than IE. This IC current is comparable with IE, but it is lesser than IE. And this IB current is so scanty that typically it will range in the microamperes range, whereas IE and IC are in milliampere range. So if this whole package of BJT is treated as a single node and you will apply the Kirchhoff's current law, then we can easily say that IE is equals to IB plus IC. So taking the entire BJT package as a single node and taking into considerations the branch current IE, IB and IC at this node, I can write by Kirchhoff's law that IE is equals to the sum of the collector current and the base terminal current, of which this IE and IC are in the range of in the milliampere range, whereas the IB is in the microampere range. I have already spoken about why IB is so less of a current. Then again, the IC current, the collector current IC, can be broken down into two component currents, that is IC is equals to IC majority plus IC minority. IC minority is the current due to the movement of charge carriers from N to P, even when this DC bias is not there, or you can say that this is open circuit. If this is open circuit, then also in that case what happens? There is no majority charge carriers holes to be transformed from P to N. So whatever minority charge carriers in N is there, those are the holes solely of this N layer only. So when those N layer holes are pushed by this positive potential of this VCC DC bias potential, those holes when move to P, so due to that whatever current in IC results is the IC minority. That means IC minority is that component of IC current when this is open, or you can say this VEE DC bias is not present. So that is IC minority. Now what is IC majority? IC majority is that component of collector current which is contributed by the majority charge carriers of this p layer, that is holes, when they move under the effect of this VEE to N layer, and the majority holes after coming here, when they are treated as minority charge carriers of this N layer, and the reverse bias of this PN junction causes those minority holes to move from this layer to this layer in the effect of this reverse bias. So those charge carriers movement when causes a current that contributes to IC majority. So IC majority is solely due to the majority holes which has moved from here to here, and by the reverse bias of this VCC they again move from this N layer to the base N layer to the P layer. So that causes the IC majority. So hence we can say this IC is a contributed by IC majority and IC minority. So IC majority is in the milliampere range. Again, IC majority is in milliampere range, and this IC minority is in microampere range. So you can better relate to the IC minority being in microampere range if you will try to relate this IC minority is due to a reverse bias condition. So when IC minority, what is IC minority? It is the current IC current from N to P, the minority current from N to P in the absence of this DC bias. So you can relate that IC minority is nothing but the reverse current when the PN junction diode is reverse biased. When the PN junction is reverse biased, then whatever reverse current is there, that is IC minority in this case. So we know already that while studying the PN junction diode, the reverse current is typically in the microampere or nanoampere range, and so also the IC minority will also be in the microampere or nanoampere range. While studying diode, we also studied that the reverse current diode current which exists in the reverse bias condition is quite sensitive to temperature conditions. So we have already have some statistics how the reverse saturation current varies as a function of temperature, and so also this IC minority also is very sensitive. In the case of BJT, this IC minority is very sensitive to temperature conditions. So if the temperature increases, IC minorities also increases drastically, and this is an unwanted thing. IC minority being very sensitive to temperature, and hence when temperature rises, the IC minority rising, it is quite unwanted thing for the BJT operation. The semiconductor manufacturing techniques are improving. This IC minority is also getting decreased or getting taken care of. So by now we have two important equations to keep it in mind, so that we can always refer to while referring to BJT. That is, one equation is IE is equals to IC plus IB, and this applies for any BJT irrespective of whether it is a NPN BJT or PNP BJT. This particular equation will always apply. IE is equals to IC plus IB. And another equation which we can take note of from this discussion is that IC is IC majority plus IC minority. In some texts IC minority is written as ICO. So it is IC majority plus ICO. So what do you mean by ICO notation here? ICO simply means that as the IC minority is, ICO is same as IC minority. So why CO notation is there? CO is to specify that collector current which prevails even when this emitter terminal is open, even when the emitter terminal is open. Okay, so ICO is, so in some texts IC minority is written more popularly written as ICO to refer as collector current which exists when the emitter terminal is open.